Matt Gaetz. He is a member of the House Judiciary Committee. And Congressman, Mr. McCabe apparently will be in front of your committee tomorrow, but again, behind closed doors. The public's not going to be able to hear that. Why not?
Well, we absolutely need to get sworn testimony under oath in public because the American people deserve to know whether or not their taxpayer money was used to fund a dossier to discredit the president. We have to know whether that dossier was then dressed up as an intelligence document and used to spy on Americans. And we certainly have to know why Nellie Orr, the wife of Bruce Orr, one of the top officials of the Department of Justice, was getting paid by the very company paid by the Democrats to go give money to the Russians to dig up dirt on the president that wasn't true. These are critical questions that go to the fundamentals of our democratic institutions in this country, and I think that the best antidote is a whole lot of sunshine, and everybody needs to know the answers to these questions.
And you know, Congressman, there's another member of this cabal, if you want to call it that, in the Justice/FBI Department. That's Peter Strzok. And we saw his text to his girlfriend, who was also in the FBI, that focuses on what might be Andrew McCabe. He said, "I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected," talking about Trump, "but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. Was he referring once and for all to Andy McCabe in that? Because that would mean a kind of conspiracy to try to keep Trump out of the White House.
Well, absolutely. That email makes Andrew McCabe a witness to a potential conspiracy to undermine the duly elected president of the United States. And just soak in the arrogance from those text messages that these people at the FBI are establishing an insurance policy in case they don't get the outcome they want in an election. This government doesn't belong to the FBI or the Department of Justice. It belongs to the American people. The voters make decisions, not the bureaucrats. And we have to have transparency and oversight and systems in place so that in the future, we never have a circumstance where the deep state can go and undermine somebody the people have elected.
Was the Trump dossier that insurance?
Oh, absolutely. Look, the insurance was to discredit the president. And unequivocally, the ties between this Trump dossier, the Democratic National Committee, the FBI, and then the very wife of one of the top officials at the Department of Justice make very clear that this was a coordinated effort to undermine President Trump. And if we allow this to continue, it casts a cloud over an entire presidency, and it leaves in place institutions that aren't truly serving the will of the people. Very
quickly, let's leave on a bit of good news, which was the passage of the tax cuts. You were meeting with the president and the other leaders today who were applauding that. I guess you're just going to have to wait and see what happens. If there is an economic revival as a result of these tax cuts, do you think that will sweep you in 2018?
Well, it's already happening. We've had over 3% growth in the first quarter of the Trump presidency. President Trump announced that AT&T is going to use the revenue from this tax cut to boost wages and boost the opportunities that they have for their employees, more investment in this country. And this should be what we are judged by. Do wages rise for the American people? Do opportunities increase? And is there more of a path for people to achieve the full extent of their prosperity? We've tried it the Democrat way for 8 years, and we didn't see wage growth. Now we will under President Trump.
All right. We've got to see government cutbacks, too. That's part of the problem. That's the other part of the equation that is not here. Congressman Gaetz, good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Joining us tonight, George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. Professor, great to have you with us. What do you make of it all? Another behind closed doors session with a high-ranking FBI or Justice Department official. Where are we headed here?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think that the positive thing here is that we are getting this testimony. The FBI tends to be very cloistered, very secretive, obviously, much for good reason. But in some cases, it's cultural. They tend to resist efforts by Congress to conduct oversight. They're yielding, finally, in producing these witnesses. And what we learn could be very important in terms of the future of the FBI, the future of these individuals. These are legitimate concerns. I mean, it is a legitimate concern if there was a political influence, not just at the FBI, but in these particular investigations. And it requires greater transparency than most of these FBI officials feel comfortable with.
We've had an extraordinary number of officials appear before the oversight committees, whether it be judiciary, whether it be intelligence, in the House and Senate. And the answers that leaders at the very top of the FBI and Justice Department have been giving were interposing the Office of Inspector General as a reason not to give the committee its due as an oversight organization. This is absolutely egregious conduct, in my personal judgment, on the part of those officials. They're basically saying that they've got reasons not to permit our Constitution to work. That's arrogance in the extreme.
Well, I'll tell you where I agree is that Congress has for too long allowed executive branch officials to be in open contempt without any repercussions or any response from Congress. They have a right of oversight. It's as if the IG's office is superior to the legislative branch in Article 1. And I'm glad to see the members of Congress finally flexing that muscle and trying to regain some of that ground. I thought it was a good thing when Chairman Nunes said, we're prepared to hold people in contempt, even in a Republican administration, if that's what it'll take. I thought that was a good moment, quite frankly, to see Congress acting that way.
I concur wholeheartedly, and I will go a little further. I believe that Chairman Nunes has, if you will, laid out the template for how a chairman of an oversight committee, but in particular intelligence committees, should be conducting themselves assertively, aggressively, within the bounds of the Constitution, and insisting on oversight over these intelligence committees that, in my opinion, since last August, have demonstrated themselves, and by last August I'm referring to actually 2016, when we started hearing from the intelligence community about their political judgments on the candidates who are running for president. They have broached nearly every tradition and demanded standard of propriety on the part of the intelligence community. This has been quite something for the American people to have to put up with.
Well, what really concerns me is that what the committee was asking for was perfectly legitimate. You know, they weren't asking about the investigation, facts about that, as much as the investigators. It was about them, not their targets that they were pursuing. And they have largely obstructed this effort. So this week is a big moment in terms of getting some of these people under oath.
Under oath, and McCabe, what are your thoughts about the calls for him to be fired? This being the man who recused himself 6 days before the election, as we'll recall, having already made most of the decisions that would have been in conflict with him.
You know, though, I'm not one of those who have called for him to be fired. I don't think there's evidence to support it. You try to be fair, particularly to people who are working in government. We'll find out a lot about McCabe's conduct, and there may come a time when we have to do that. But I think that at most what we have here is a really problematic response to conflicts, slow, and in my view, not very, what you might say, prophylactic, to try to find ways to avoid conflicts. And instead, a lot of these officials seem comfortable with them. We still have key figures with conflicts of interest in the investigation.
Well, amongst them, Strzok, who has been involved in a number of points of contact in the Clinton investigation, whether it be the emails, whether it be the decision to make a decision to exculpate her. We have the same thing with McCabe, though. He is there involved in a wide swath of these issues under investigation, which on its face seems to, without question, be in conflict, at least in appearance. And why aren't our investigatory agencies and officials being held to the highest standard, not the de minimis?
Well, they should be held to a high standard. And I think what we learned from this week could very well fill in a lot of these gaps. And, you know, while there may be not grounds for termination, there may be grounds for further separation of McCabe from any involvement. There's certainly grounds to question his judgment. And he's not alone in that. I'm really surprised by the lack of professionalism that's long been the touchstone of the FBI that's coming out, and not just these emails, but in the pattern of decisions that were made.
Professor Jonathan Turley, always great to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight. And we will be, let's talk further, as we most assuredly